R&D tax credit permanent. That's a bill that I'm working on with the Democrat member of my Small Business Committee, Glenn Nye, who we serve as the chairman and ranking member of a subcommittee. We're trying to get the R&D tax credit made permanent, which would go a long way in creating certainty with entrepreneurs that incentive is going to be there for the next 10 or 20 years as they make the decision about whether to make a capital improvement. So to your original question, is this perception a reality? Absolutely. You go talk to the man on the street, the small business owner, he will tell you that the policies that have been promoted under the first year of the Obama administration and the rhetoric coming out of Washington is anything but pro-business. It's anti-business. And it's created, unfortunately, a lot of uncertainty in the market, and it's why there's a lot of capital sitting off the street and a lot of folks not making the kind of investment we need to get our economy back on track.
Dan Maffei.
Well, I think, you know, to a certain extent, the debate is over this label. Of course, the president isn't anti-business. I do think you know, it might be a fair criticism to say that there hasn't been enough done for small businesses in the first year, though there was a lot of stuff in the stimulus bill that was helpful. There was additional stuff passed for you know, for hope for homeowners and cash for clunkers that help certain kinds of small businesses, real estate businesses on the one hand, autos in the other. It's funny, I agree with a lot of Aaron's points. I mean, I think I am a co-sponsor, or certainly will co-sponsor the bill to make the R&D credit permanent. And there are a lot of things right now, ideas the president laid out in the State of the Union address to help businesses that are very important. But, you know, I've been listening to your show earlier, and, you know, the president, when one caller was called a communist, the next caller was called a corporatist. I think, you know, when you're being attacked so vehemently by sort of the extremes on both sides, maybe you're doing something right. I think the president is neither anti-business, but he's also not going to give away the stores to the big businesses or the big conglomerates either. We're going to try to encourage small businesses, family businesses. Those are the kind of businesses that America was grown on. Those are the kind of businesses that don't export jobs because they can't, because they're in our communities like Syracuse, like Peoria, like many other areas. And that's where we're going to focus on. And instead of worrying about this debate about last year, I think we should just move forward and do everything we can right now to stimulate small business growth, particularly in my district. That means getting capital, access to reasonable interest loans.
Forest, Illinois. Leon, Republican. Please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, this is for Representative Schock, and I live in Forest, Illinois, which is just right outside of your district. But have you paid much attention to the wind farms coming up in Illinois, and has it destroyed the landscape, and are they really paying for themselves?
Well, thank you for your call. Look, I support wind energy. I think it's a responsible move for our country. I understand that not everybody thinks that they're pretty to look at, or that they want one popping up next to them. The reality is that much of what was in the president's energy plan was to promote more wind energy, more solar, more renewable energy, and I think we can get there as a country by incentivizing it without taxing the heck out of the industries we want less of. We created more wind energy in this country over the past decade. In fact, after the wind energy tax credit was put into effect by Congress, the next year wind energy production in this country went up 40% in just 1 year. In fact, we are the fastest growing wind energy producers in the world right now as a result of the wind energy tax credit. So I am aware of them. There's a ton of them going up in my congressional district. I know in central Illinois and northern Illinois, especially along the right wind channels, you got to have the wind for the wind farms. They've been very successful there. Most of the farmers that I talk to are happy to either lease or sell the small piece of ground required for the windmill to actually sit on. But it's important that we make sure that they are a productive, contributing member of the energy platform, if you will. And one of the downfalls, of course, to wind energy is that it's not as reliable. It's not as consistent depending on where the wind is. And so your question about whether or not they're actually paying for themselves will be a matter of time. I mean, obviously, their life cycle tends to be around the 20-year period that they need to be replaced and spruced up, if you will. But I believe I've seen the financial models of them. Obviously, people would not be investing in them if they did not believe they were a wise investment. But over the next 20 years, a windmill that's put up today should not only pay for itself, but also adequately replenish the energy supply system for what it took to build it.
Redlands, California, Marie, Democrat. You are on C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Please go ahead.
Good morning. I just wanted to say to the American people, beware of globalists. I believe they're unpatriotic. I believe that they need to repeal NAFTA because it has not worked for the American people. And I believe that this crosses both party lines, Democrat and Republican. And I also had a question. I don't think that most American people would construe someone making $1 million as a small business. So if you can give me a definition of how many people or what the amount of revenue a company intakes as would be construed as small business, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Congressman Maffei, how would you identify a small business?
Well, it is a complicated question because $1 million, if it's a S-corp, if it's a kind of business that's closely held, the person who owns the business may technically be making over $1 million, but it's actually the business income, the way the tax code is set up. So there's the various things that people talked about. Number of employees, maybe number of employees is the way to do it. Annual income. There's a variety of ways, and I don't necessarily want to, cast it in stone right now. I think it's something that we would have to talk about. But certainly, small to medium-sized businesses are the ones that are creating most of the new jobs in this country. That's not to say that, by the way, that big businesses don't create any jobs. I mean, we need to have a good policy that encourages the private sector, that makes sure that there's basic ground rules set, make sure that we can't have the kind of excesses that we've had in financial companies, with all the fifth and sixth level derivatives and things like that couldn't be valued, but that help businesses. And I do agree with a caller also on NAFTA. I think we need a very, very different kind of trade policy, as I said earlier. But I would just try to ask people, don't impugn anyone's patriotism. I really think most Americans, even most politicians, are really trying to do the right thing by their districts and by their jobs and by the American people. We just have different points of views. We disagree, but name calling doesn't necessarily help.
Congressman Schock, you're a member of the Small Business Committee. How do you ID small business?
Well, it's kind of ironic because I have hundreds of small businesses in my district, and then I actually represent one of the big businesses, which I mentioned, Caterpillar, in my hometown. Look, I think from a truly definition standpoint, you tend to say a small business is somewhere between 50 and 200 employees. Tends to be a small business. But your caller specifically asked, what is the revenue threshold? And I think she and many Americans who want to try and create a revenue threshold are walking down a very dangerous path, because obviously what may be $1 million in revenue, may be a lot to one business, could be very, very insignificant to another business. And of course, it depends on what kind of business they're in. Dan talked about the work that we did together on a bipartisan basis this summer, trying to save the local car dealerships in our countries that are extremely important to our local communities. Those small businesses, those car dealerships, they sell millions of dollars of cars, but they work on a 1 or 2% profit margin. They make very little money off of the sale of new cars, yet their revenue looks like, gee, they generated $5, $10, $15 million in revenue from sales of cars, but their profit is very small. So at the end of the day, we need to be having pro-growth strategies. We need to reward people who make investment, who take risk, and then who make a profit. At the end of the day, the question the caller needs to be asking is, what happens to that profit? If somebody makes $1 million, what happens to that profit? Well, they're going to reinvest it. They're going to either reinvest it in the stock market, they're going to reinvest it in their small business and hire more people or buy new capital. And all of those actions with that profit create jobs. And at the end of the day, I believe that the small business owner, the entrepreneur, the American taxpayer is a lot more responsible with his or her money than the federal government ever will be through increased taxes.
Beverly in Phoenix, Independent Line. You are on with Congressmen Schock and Maffei.
Good morning.
Hi.
Peter.
Oh, good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
I changed my registration, and I am now an independent.
And what were you before, Beverly?
I was a Democrat.
Now, why did you change your registration?
I was a proud Democrat.
And why did you
now
change?
I'm just a proud American.
Why did you change?
Why? Are you kidding me? I mean, if you've got the majority in Congress and the House and you can't get a health bill passed, then you don't deserve to be there. It's just that simple. I'm 75, and I've never seen such garbage in my whole life. And please don't ask that Representative Schock a question because he filibusters.
Now, were you in favor of the House-passed bill or the Senate-passed bill?
I was in favor of every one of them. Every time they revised it, I said, okay, just get something passed. And I've got insurance. I was 75 yesterday, and I've got my health insurance, so I don't need it. My grandkids need it. And you know what aggravates me more than anything is that our federal government is the largest employer in the United States, and my tax dollars and my grandkids' tax dollars pays for every single benefit that these two men get sitting up there. Every tax dollar is paid for it, and their cost of living is paid for by my tax dollars that they get automatically. They don't even have to ask for it. They just get it. What business in the United States gives automatic cost of living raises to their employees? The only one are these politicians that give it to themselves.
All right, Beverly, there's a lot to work with there. It's good to hear from you. And gentlemen, you heard her, no filibustering in honor of her 75th birthday. We'll start in Syracuse.
Well, actually, it's funny. I co-sponsored with another Republican friend of mine, Chris Lee, a bill that we did pass the House to get rid of those automatic pay increases. I agree with the caller. I think at a time when Americans are sacrificing, so should members of Congress. It's hard to argue with her about the gridlock in Washington and how frustrating it is that after a year of work, a health care bill hasn't been passed. And I do think that a lot of that, if you listen to the President's State of the Union address, you could piece together, and there were many, many, many pieces of legislation that passed the House, but we can't seem to get it past the Senate. So speaking of filibustering, I think we need to, in the Senate, look, the Senate's being controlled by Democrats too. I'm not trying to be partisan here. I'm just trying to say the obvious, which is we need to be able to have a Senate that can function and can pass legislation and is able to compromise with the President and the House enough to at least change punctuation marks in its bills. It can't just say this is it and take it or leave it. And if we have that kind of process, then I think we can come to some real agreements, on health care, which is very important for future generations. I think she had the exact right attitude about it. This health care bill isn't about us. It's about future generations of Americans who can't afford to continue to pay skyrocketing health costs generation after generation and getting less health care for it. And that's the most important thing there. And that's why we can't give up on health care, though we also have to make sure it no longer takes all the oxygen, that we're really focusing on the economy as well. So it's hard to disagree with the caller. It's frustrating, believe me, and I think Aaron would agree. It's frustrating for us too, and it's part of being in a democracy. But certainly, there have been many times in history when we've been able to get through these log jams and move forward, and we've got to do that again.
Congressman Maffei, did you support the House bill when it passed the health care bill?
I did support the House bill. I liked the caller. I didn't love every aspect of it, but I did think that it was so very important that we move forward and make progress. I will tell you this, though. I do not support the Senate bill in its current form. I do think that you can go too far. In the Senate bill, I personally feel burns the village in order to save it. It taxes health care in order to provide health care, and I don't see how you can diminish one person's health care or change the system, increase, try to provide health care for those who are not uninsured by diminishing someone else's health care. I think you need to work for efficiencies and make sure that we have, invest in electronic medical records and better systems of incentives to make sure physicians are actually treating patients and not just ordering tests, et cetera. And a lot of that stuff is in these bills, but it really, I think, kills the whole thing. If you're going to, tax one person's health insurance to provide somebody else's health insurance, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And so I do think there are limits to what we can support, but I certainly think there are a lot of good things in the Senate bill also, and if we could have a real negotiation, we could get there.
Congressman Schock.
Well, Peter, I agree with much of what Dan said. I mean, the caller is right. Many Americans are frustrated with the stalemate in Washington. It's one of the reasons why, even in his home state of Illinois, many people are shaking their heads saying, what happened to the talk about bipartisan? What happened to the talk about bringing people together? Your great station, C-SPAN, was supposed to be included in much of the discussion, which it was not, despite all of the repeated pledges when candidate Obama was talking about the health care debate that he was going to promote if and when he was elected president. So there have been a lot of broken promises. There have been a lot of disappointed Americans about the past year. But as Dan mentioned, let's talk about